Daniel did all that he did there. It is a prophetic foreview of history, 2,500 years in advance, right up until the age that we live in, and terminates in Daniel's 70th week. And each night we'll take a chapter, and a little bit more is added each night to the chapter. A little bit more significance, and finally at the end of time it's spotlighted right down at the end, and you find this beast power in a stronghold with a strange God. And Daniel caught him in there in a vision and watched what was going on, and the idols and whatsoever took place. You won't want to miss one night, and we'll get in time cycles and periods and zones in Daniel's 70th week, and of course handwriting on the wall and all these animal visions that he had. Now we'll begin here tonight, and it's in chapter 2. It's Daniel's metallic image, the composite man of different metals. Now these metals portrayed kingdoms that were to come. And Daniel had the gift of interpreting visions. Nebuchadnezzar had the dream-like vision. And it's a composite man of many metals, and it has symbols. Now, animals and metals in the book of Daniel symbolizes kingdoms that would rise and fall, and then at the end of time come back together under the beast power. Before I go into this, the great image, I would like to lay sort of a foundation. Now, Daniel's people was in Israel. Nebuchadnezzar, God raised up to rule the world at that time. He went into Israel and took the children of Israel back, the royal seed back to the land of Babylon, that they might help him. And when he did, he had Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children. And they were very wise. Especially Daniel had a gift and power that was with him. And so it was in a captivity period of 70 years that Daniel and the children were in Babylon. That's when Nebuchadnezzar had this great dream of this huge image that he saw, which was bright and the form was terrible thereof. Now that was from where Daniel began to prophesy. That was the first kingdom that Daniel saw. But before this was 2 more kingdoms that had went off the scene, and we'll go back and hook those on and then go right straight on out through history here. Now, out of the Garden of Eden sprang forth what we call a prehistory civilization. It was the Mesopotamian age that was flourishing during that time. The antediluvians, the age where the great flood came and the deluge carried them all away, but Noah and his family. And then out of Noah's family there was Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Came forth Nimrod, and Nimrod built a great Tower of Babel that reached up into the heavens, and a city of God there. Then the Lord come down and confounded them and scattered them across the earth. And now we begin to approach the first world empire, Egypt. The empire of the Pharaohs was the first one. Then the next empire, it was down in the Pyramidic age, down at that time in there where they were at. Then the next one was the Assyrian kingdom, the empire. Then a capital, Nineveh there, second world empire. And now we approach the subject, Daniel, coming to the third world empire, which was Babylon, the head of gold. There in this particular kingdom is where the dream was given, Nebuchadnezzar. Now, that's 2 kingdoms prior to the 4 successive kingdoms that Daniel will see in this image, that he will interpret it. Then at the end of that, there's one more, a religious kingdom of a state religion type in the government at the end of time. Now that makes 7. Now the book of Revelations, chapter 17, about 7 through 12, you'll find all 7 kingdoms. And even the 7th is of the 8th, and the 8th is of the 7th, which is the Antichrist kingdom, the false kingdom. Now, we know in Revelations it depicts the woman upon the 7-headed beast, and he's wounded, and then he becomes the 8th head. You read it in chapter 17. Now there's history, the 2 prior, and then Daniel with the 4 successive kingdoms in a row. The last one was Rome, the Empire of Rome, which gave way, and it was still Rome, and then it come back again in the same way. We'll go into that now. Let's begin to read. You'll find it fascinating each night as the record's produced and as God portrays history, just like it took place and will take place right up until the prophetic events take place as we close the age out. Is right in the book of Daniel, the Old Testament apocalypse. Now, Daniel, chapter 2 of Daniel, he told Nebuchadnezzar that God revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. Now, during the time that Nebuchadnezzar saw this great image, whose brightness was excellent, and the form was terrible, it was awesome to him. And he forgot the dream. It was a vision dream. And it troubled him. God took it from him. And he didn't know what to do about it. And he called all the wise men, all the astrologers, and the soothsayers. And they were dumbfounded, and they couldn't even tell him what it was about. And Nebuchadnezzar didn't have any kind of, he wasn't balanced when it come to judgment. And he told them if they didn't come up with something quick, that he would cut them to pieces and make their houses dunghills. He meant what he said. He was an absolute monarch, the head of gold. Then finally there was a man found called Daniel. And he came in and he told Nebuchadnezzar, but there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Notice this prophecy, the future events, the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter? And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. Nebuchadnezzar wanted to know what was in the future, and God appeared to him. So Daniel the prophet, the Hebrew, talented of God and gifted beyond measure, began to speak. And he told him, chapter 2 of Daniel 31, he starts, Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, and his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. God Almighty cut it out supernaturally, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, and the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together. The wealth was broken all to pieces. And it became like the shaft of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, the Spirit of God, the glory of God, and filled the whole earth. Now the next few nights, due to the book of Daniel, almost every other chapter, it speaks of gold and silver. It speaks of precious things that the Bible gives. And so the next few nights, because it's in the book of Daniel, it's got to be brought out. Daniel showed an industrial age when he spoke of it coming. And I will speak on the monetary changes, currencies, the gold, the silver, the stronghold, the beast powers, and how they will operate this. So for the men of the stock markets and the world trade, and those men that are out in there where this goes on, you listen. You'll have to take the spiritual in order to find out what's going to happen. Right now, the lightning flashes of a new financial pattern is right before us. Changes are coming in every direction. The dollar seems to be stretched. Artificially, prices are being put up and up to keep a depression from their doors. They are frightened, and they're working together. Daniel gave the answer. He also showed the downfall. We know these things. So the next few nights, concerning silver and gold and the currencies of the world and the financial pattern, we'll be going deep and deeper each night as we go in to the great mysteries of God, finding out that even during the last part of the age, bread may be possibly $28 a loaf. The black horse of the apocalypse rides with the scales. Revelation 6, 5, and 6. And he begins to measure it out. Famine and desolation set in the last few years upon the earth. Now we begin to read. Then Daniel showed him and began to interpret world history in advance. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom and power and strength. And whosoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls, and all of these things, he said, they're under your power and your control. And he said, thou art this head of gold, Nebuchadnezzar. The third world empire, the first from the visions of Daniel, Babylon. Now the excellency of Babylon, not even the pyramids hardly at the time, overshadowed the great age of the golden head, where it was one of the seven wonders of the world, the hanging gardens, the huge avenues. They lived within it, and their great walls. The river flowed through it, Euphrates. A vast outlay, grandiose and powerful. And Daniel said to him, thou art this head of gold. That empire vanished in the winds, but will return again under a new system at the end. Then he goes on and he says, verse 39, and after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over much of the earth. Now the other kingdom, the inferior kingdom, the breast and arms of silver, was the Mede-Persian Empire, Darius and Cyrus. The right hand being the Persian Empire, the left hand being the Median Empire, the weaker. Now that's the arms of silver and the breast. The Mede-Persian, the dual empire. And it came upon the scene also. And then he saw another one. And the belly and the thighs of brass. This was the swift, fast-moving Macedonian Empire. Alexander the Great, the young general, conquered the world practically overnight. Conquest. Leaped across the Hellespont. Demonic and powerful. They just fell one right after the other. He died at 32 years old. The world was in his hand, crumbled. Daniel the Hebrew prophet saw him coming, swift and fast like a leopard, moving. He was also in this brass of judgment and the thighs. He faded from the scene. Drunken orgy, gone. Military genius. Even today the stratagem is used of Alexander the Great. His kingdom vanished. It was so fast that he put history ahead 1,000 years in advance, and there's more prophecy in the Bible concerning this man that had demonic powers to do these things. And then came the legs of iron, Rome. The age of the Caesars raised up, and Daniel the prophet got to see it. And it split right at the legs of iron. And when it split, one went into the east empire. One went into the west. This was after Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, and the Caesar empires at that time. And it bare rule over all the earth. Now, about the time of Constantine, when he made Christianity the state religion, was during the age of the Thyatira age, Pergamus age, during that time. It's when this splitting began to take place here. Now the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. Rome. The pagan of the Caesars, we mentioned. For as much as iron breaketh to pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these things shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly broken, and partly strong, and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. At the end of time, that iron went right straight down east and west. And right at the bottom, in the toes, a new element began to appear that Daniel saw. Clay. It was mixed with iron. That's your last kingdom on earth. That's where your little horn stands up tomorrow night when we get to him. And those animals come down through there. We put that together. And a little more is added and spotlighted in there. Those kingdoms come together under the Antichrist. The same thing can be seen in chapter 13 of Revelations. But they cannot stay together. And at the end, The clay is communism and the kings of the East. They break from Babylon, the successor to the old Roman Empire of the religious part there. All of the West break away. The iron and clay cannot stand, and iron is religion and state. And clay will be communism and the Orientals, and they erupt in Armageddon, and a Holocaust takes place. And God stands before the beast, destroys it at that time. Come down in Armageddon. I'm going to name. Remember that stone cut out of the mountain? That's the one that Daniel saw at the end of time. He saw the face of God cut in stone. Somebody says, you can't see the face of God. You're a liar. Isaiah saw him sitting on a throne high and lifted up. You cannot look at God when fire's on his face. You cannot look at him when he's a consuming fire. He will consume you. But he can come into forms, and you can look upon God. Abraham stood right there with him. John saw him as a jasper and a sardine stone against that rainbow like an emerald flash. Right out there. That stone that comes. But let's read this. The 10 toes of the image represent the 10 kingdoms at the end time. Now notice this. This means that there are 10 kingdoms with clay and 10 kingdoms with iron. Now here's a revelation. I was sitting there one day. Of the Lord, I said, always people said 10 nations, 10 toes. The Lord said there's 10 iron, 10 clay, that's 20. See them running together down there? There's 20 there. Western Europe is 10, and the rest is over here, and I'll name them. They're in the east. They lay back in Eastern Europe, going that way. So you got iron, you got clay. You got 10 iron, you got 10 clay. Up here at the top is the horns that destroy it at the end. Now you watch and see when we get in the next few nights. Now we'll name the clay. And the communist countries have already appeared in order. This thing is getting in order. World trade is on the horizon. The commodity man that Daniel saw standing right here. This great image that Daniel saw, the head of gold, silver, brass, right down to the iron, right down to the iron and clay, right down to the bottom will come back together in Revelation 13. And you'll see better tomorrow night when we get over here in chapter 7 of Daniel. Now that metal of the gold and silver and iron, right, that's a concentration of wealth in those kingdoms. That's your concentration of wealth in there, right down to the clay, till they've sucked it all out of there. And appears a great empire at the end of time. The animals rising and falling that Daniel saw, rising and falling tomorrow night when we get into it. It depicts again under Revelation 13 and 17 and chapter 12. You can see part of it there, how they come back together. Now here are your clay countries that Daniel saw. Russia, East Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. There's your 10 that will combine with power. Then, of course, they will be the Orientals, which will be with them in another covenant like in the East. Now, there are 10 kingdoms of iron. And Western Europe plays the role here. Eastern Europe the other way with Russia. Western Europe this way, and the United States will also be in a role with Western Europe. They're not yet under the control of the Antichrist completely, but there is to come a prince on the scene. Now we'll read those. NATO, Defense Pact, the organization, no doubt the forerunner, or will lay right in there where this little horn will come from, that we'll get in the next few nights. England, the common market countries. England, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, France, Holland, Luxembourg, and West Germany. And possibly, no doubt, Ireland is there. And tentatively, one of these countries may shift back and forth. Tentatively, you have Spain and Sweden and possibly Switzerland. But I just named 9 of them. There's only 9 there now, but one of those others will have to come in and be the 10th one. Then you've got your iron 10 countries. Then you've got your clay 10 countries. Western Europe, iron, clay, Eastern Europe. That'll come together and form under these toes. And an empire will be formed. And it's the successor to the old Roman Empire, which went both east and went both west, according to the Britannica and also according to Bible prophecy. It's right down on the power, the beast power, at the end of time. There will be a man of consummate wickedness that will rise on the scene tomorrow night that we'll think about. He'll deceive the Catholics, the Methodists, the Lutherans. He'll deceive all Christianity. He will be their guiding star. It's to watch all businessmen, factories, and industries. Craft will prosper at his look. Industry sparkles. Watch and see him come at the end. Then there'll be famine All kinds of things take place. And we must, now I've named that part there, but at the end it said, in the days of these kings, in chapter 2 of Daniel 44, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, that breaketh to pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come hereafter. The dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof is sure. It was thus saith the Lord, it shall come to pass. It will come to pass. Everyone knows that there's a mountain that's carved right into this temple, and it has a kingly face to it. You can get it and see it for yourself. All over the nation, come with your cameras. You can take a shot of it. You can see a witness that God is giving the Gentile nations. There's Daniel's prophetic foreview, the great image that he saw with these kingdoms, the head of gold, and so forth, right down the line. But what I was just talking about was something behind here in the mountains, not this here, which is here it says, in the days of these kings shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom, it says, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. This is what comes down, and the earth is filled full of the glory of the Lord. Now that there is the kingdom of God. The mountain speaks of the kingdom of God. I would like to, if I can here, all of this taking place. They're all getting ready to do something. This is from an AP wire. The UN Assembly is working on 6 problems: mass poverty, population, food, energy, military expenditures, and world monetary system. They are working, now this is my quote, they are working for a controlling system. Also, a leader in NATO, which is the common market countries I just named of Western Europe, said they did not need another committee, but a super strong man to lift them up out of economic morass. He said, send us such a man, be he God or devil, we will receive him. They may not know it, but it is from this area that a super leader is to rise. The little horn, Revelation 13, Daniel 7 gives you the picture there. Now 20 nations met with the United States here. And the Lord bless America. She's going to make some sudden and moves that look good but won't turn out that way in the final end. And they all met together. 20 nations on money and world trade. They're ruling out gold, they said, and they're going to float the currency. Now they're going to get in trouble. They're going to float this currency. They want it to finally, I guess, blow up at Armageddon. The inflation is becoming worldwide. Unless a miracle takes place, the dollar will be worth about 15 or 20 cents. And they're floating these currencies. They can't use the gold because not enough of the countries have that kind of backing yet. So they put the gold in a stronghold, but yet they guard it. Why? You see, when the inflation, when you're floating the currencies, they've got away from the original of the Bible pattern. The inflation is getting worldwide. And they don't know what to do with it. What is inflation? It is simply taxes that should have been paid years ago and are not paid, and the government keeps adding it on to us. And they've got 40 years they can't even cover. So how are they going to destroy this inflation without setting up a new system? A new financial pattern is coming. Inflation is taxes that should have been paid, but they're not. And so the government continues, and each year, artificially, they're keeping the prices going up. Once in a while, they'll come down a little bit. They go up higher and higher. Why? Because they know a depression could come. So it's what we call a depression in another way, an inflationary depression, which is the same thing, but it takes a longer course for them. Like a fellow said, if you want to get it over with, have your depression and you'll get it over with. This way, they're going slower and slower. But God's going to get the gospel out. But there are financial trends coming. And we'll be speaking more about the government is now wanting the American people to buy gold again. Now, we'll get into this and how idols will come up on the land and all the world. It's fascinating the next few nights here. So here we are. You see, something's taken place. When you have a $10 bill, it's $10 in debt. That's why it won't buy nothing. And pretty soon that $10 will flop down and it won't buy anything. It's in debt. When you got $20, it's $20 in debt. You see, it's getting less and less value. So now something's happening on the earth. And by the Lord's power, we find this man at the end of time in a stronghold. And brother, he's got all of the metal there is stacked up in there. But we know this, as long as there's currency, use it. But there will be one day a worldwide currency, no doubt. But there'll also be another way during the Great Tribulation where there'll be a mark issued there. Now, I would like to say this. Later I will go into that. There's going to build some cities, United States, that along the Suez Canal and different places. And I know the beast will control the power of treasures and trade worldwide. They're going in worldwide trade too. He will have a spiritual headquarters, this beast power. And then he will also have a commercial headquarters, buying and selling. Read Revelation chapter 18, about the 8th on down, and you'll begin to see how that's really coming. They're burnt with fire at the end. That's not my subject tonight. We'll get away from that. But I would like to say this. Time is growing shorter and shorter. Now this tonight is one record series, and there'll be one each night, and we'll get deeper and deeper. I'm going into some transition periods to show you how the age is closing out on us. I won't be able to go as deep as I want to, but you can get the record put out by Tiffany Records that's listening to this, and it's called Prophet in the Eclipse, and it gives you the dates, the time cycles, and the measures, but I will give you some of it right now. During the days of Christ, he spoke that the temple would be destroyed in Jerusalem, and that they would be scattered into every nation. 40 years later, right to the time, Titus overfled the temple. Gold run down between the cracks and all over the grounds. The people perished from there, fled. And the transition year of 40 years elapsed since Christ was on the cross, and they were scattered into every nation. Now, towards the end of time, there's to be another transition period. In 1946, 1948, the Jews, the Israelites, Hebrews, begin to go home. And they become a nation, and they started back after being dispersed. Now the gospel went from the Jews during that 40-year transition period before to the Gentile. Now it's coming back from the Gentile over to the Jews. Pretty soon he'll go back to them. So 40 years from 46 or 8 would make 86 and 88, and that 40-year transition period of the Jews being home in the promised land, the budding of the fig tree, is out. I'm not predicting anything, but I do know this, that watch those 80s and the Holocaust. Be careful. Armageddon is in there. The latter part of the 70s, 80s, God appeared to me. There will be people here in the early 80s. He has already spoken that. But also, we know this. Back behind that is what we call the translation too, or it could be back and forth one way or the other. We're to watch the 70s, even for the coming of the Lord. Each night we're to watch the Lord. But the Lord told me that the latter part of these 70s and 80s and the early part would be events of such a nature that possibly people would not even believe if I was to tell them what was going to occur. Great Holocaust and cataclysmics, worldwide confrontations. Watch it as we gather up in there. You know the calendar has been changed during the days of the Caesars. And right now we're in 1991 from 1974 really, because the calendars are off about 15 to 17 years. Then Jesus spoke and said he would shorten the time, so we can't even time it out. Except this, we know this, that we're going towards the end of time. And we know there's a translation of the true elect that goes out first, and then it goes into a great tribulation period of time. So watch those dates and look up. I'm not trying to predict no certain date. I'm giving you a general season of some events that will take place. There's new systems coming, new type of trading coming. All of these systems are coming back together under chapter Revelations 13. You can read it yourself. People, Daniel, the Hebrew prophet, also witnessed the sanctuary in Daniel's 70th week. And he saw the Antichrist polluted. He witnessed him on down through the chapters as he rose to power, and at the end he's got everything in his hands. And chapter 8, the ram and the he-goat, and out of one of those partitions that split came forth a little horn. And then tomorrow night, chapter 7, we're going to be on that, and that'll also be given. How that each night something is added, and how the Lord goes in there. Now the prophet saw at the end of time there will be a Jewish temple. They will get their money. They've got much money of it now, but people all over the world will give them money. I have some interesting articles in the next few nights when I preach on the Jewish temple that will come, and the abomination of desolation upon the earth from these beast powers. But God will stand with the Hebrews at the end of time. They will know their Messiah, those that God has called. Daniel was standing there, and he saw before him 2,500 years in advance, portrayed and interpreted right up until Daniel's 70th week. It terminates at the end of time. And tomorrow night, we go in to the different animals that symbolize kingdoms and come right straight down, and we get even a much, I would say, a better look that you know where you stand, and a deep mystery from God as He begins to bring this out. People, there's not much time to work for God. And the businessmen today in this nation, they're looking for this, they're looking for that way to make money, and they're looking this way. But the thing to do said, seek God and His kingdom, and all these things shall be added. We're going into, as I spoke, a world change. Europe and Russia, all that's been prophesied on my scrolls has come to pass. And the United States will also be in agreement. There will be two gentlemen that rises on the scene. Europe will get the answers to their cry. A strong man will step forth. Fascinating. A bewitching spellbinder. Seem like lamb-like qualities at first, and he'll just like a dragon. The United States, they'll get the answers to their prayers. There's a personality that's going to step forth. You watch and see. Then, of course, God will have men in Russia and in Israel, too, that will be in there in a three-way or four tie-up. We're coming to the end of the age. There's no way out of it. Like I say, He'll come in just like, you've heard the classic story, I believe it is, of Robert Louis Stevens. I believe it was the Jekyll and the Mr. Hyde. He'll come in like Jekyll did. A peacemaker, sort of like fellow wanted to help somebody. But he'll go out like Mr. Hyde. He'll go out as a madman. In the height of his madness, we see him in chapter 28 of Ezekiel, and also in the end of the book of Daniel. He's not the same personality as they see at first. There's a change comes. The Bible shows you in 13 what happens when the beast from the bottomless pit enters this personality upon the world. And the people are going to see a vast change. Everything now is getting ready. The whole earth is coming together. And I will predict this, that there will be idols in America before the end of time, and they will worship them. They will have their gold and silver idols and brass, etc. All over in Europe, in the Orientals, they will worship idols again before the end of time. Paul the Apostle spoke in Diana the Goddess, I believe it was, in the huge temple in Ephesus, where that during the ages of the church ages, where the abominable things took place, where actually the church was used as a house where harlots were, in the corners, and the homos, and the lesbians, all of these things in dark corners that Paul spoke about. Then at the time of the end, what Paul saw will appear again, and they'll have it right in many of the churches. And I've got some books coming out on some prophecy and different things explaining all of these things, the abominations that shall set in upon the earth. We're at the end of the age. God is warning His people, pulling them together, that they may join in the Spirit. Now, I have completed 5 books. The last 3 are ultra-prophetic. In other words, they deal in prophetic events. No one's had a chance to read or hear them. I've done them since this spring. We've released 1. We'll release another one. They're not on record right now. They'll be coming in book form. And the last 3 of those books, new books, deal with prophecy and things that I couldn't get to while I'm doing the Daniel series. And they'll be released soon. Can you feel the Lord? I'm going to pray for the people listening to this record. Lord, I want you to reach out and touch every one of them that has this record. Touch them and bless their hearts and guide them to see the events that are going to take place. Prosper and let health be with them. Heal, Lord God, and bless their souls. Amen. So Daniel saw and interpreted the head of gold, the arms of silver and breast, the belly of brass and thighs, the iron that was in the legs, and then the iron and clay at the end that come together. So tomorrow night the little horn stands up and we see the age beginning to come together. God bless you.